Most founders post constantly and get nothing from it. Not because the content is bad, not because the algorithm hates them, because they're only posting one type of content and they're missing two of the three layers that actually build trust with a cold audience. And I watched a founder with real clients, real results, and real stories never convert a single one because of a mistake that's more common than anyone admits. And I'll show you exactly what happened. The fix isn't more content, it's different content. There's a three-part framework I'm calling the founder content stack: proof, perspective, process. Most founders are only doing one of those three, and that gap is exactly why your content gets engagement, but it doesn't convert. My name is Michael Reynolds. This is Hard Truths. Let's get into it. Here's what I see constantly. A founder decides they're gonna start showing up online, right? So they've got real expertise, they've got real results and real opinions, and so they start posting. Almost every time they post the same type of content. Hot takes, opinions, observations about their industry, something like, here's what I think about X, here's why Y is wrong, and here's my take on Z. And it gets some engagement. Some people like it. Some people share it. The founder feels like it's working. Yay! But 6 months later, they look at their numbers and nothing has moved. No clients from new content, no inbound opportunities, no meaningful growth, and they can't figure out why, because the content is so good, right? The opinions are real, the engagement is there, but perspective content, which is what I just described, is only 1/3 of what you need. It tells your audience how you think, but it doesn't tell them that you've done the thing, right? And it doesn't show them how you do it. Without those two other layers, your audience can appreciate your thinking without ever trusting you enough to hire you. That's the gap. And most founders never figure out what's missing because perspective content feels like the most natural thing to post. Feel me? It's just talking about what you believe. It's low friction, it's comfortable, but comfortable content rarely builds the kind of authority that moves people to act. The founder content stack has 3 layers: proof, perspective, and process. Every piece of content you create as a founder falls into one of those 3 categories, and you need all 3 working together if you want your content to actually build authority and drive business. Layer 1, let's talk about it. It is proof. Proof content shows your audience that you've done the thing. It's that you have real results, that the expertise you're claiming isn't theoretical. This is client results, case studies, before and after stories. The moment a client tells you something changed for them. Specific outcomes with specific numbers attached to them. Proof content answers the question your audience is silently asking every time they see you online. Has this person actually done what they're telling me to do? Most founders miss something about proof content though. It doesn't have to be a formal case study. It doesn't have to be a polished testimonial video. It can be a story you tell on camera about a client conversation that changed how you think about your work. It can be a result you mention in passing while making a different point entirely. It doesn't matter how you package it. What matters is that the people can point to something real. Without proof content, you're asking people to trust you based entirely upon your opinions. And that is a very high bar for a cold audience who has never met you, never worked with you, and has no real idea whether the results you're claiming are actually yours. Here's what proof content actually looks like in practice. I think that would be helpful, right? A financial advisor who posts, "My client came to me $200,000 in debt and retired at 58. That's proof. A business coach who says we took a company from 800,000 to 2.4 million in 18 months by fixing one thing in their sales process. That's proof. It doesn't have to be polished, a case study video or anything like that. It can be a sentence inside of a longer episode, but it has to be specific, it has to be real, and it has to be yours. Layer 2, let's talk about that. It is perspective. That is what most founders are already doing. It's a point of view that you have, your opinions, your takes on what's happening in your industry, the things that you believe that other people in your space might push back on. Perspective content matters because it shows your audience how you think. It differentiates you from everyone else who has come from the same credentials and has the same results. Your perspective is what makes people choose you over someone equally qualified. Most founders mess this up though. Perspective content only works when the perspective is actually yours, when it comes from your real experience, your real convictions, your real point of view that has been shaped by doing the work, not a summary of what everyone else in your industry thinks, not a safe, hedged, everyone can agree with this version of your opinion. The founders who actually build something with perspective content are willing to say the things that make some people really uncomfortable. That's what makes it work. Watered down perspective is just noise, and there's already more than enough of that online. Here's what strong perspective content actually sounds like. Not consistency is important in your brand. That's noise, right? Everyone says that. Strong perspective sounds like most founders shouldn't start a podcast. They should start a YouTube channel. And here's exactly why. Or the biggest mistake I see coaches make is trying to appeal to everyone. And I'll tell you, the moment I realized it was killing my own business. See, that is a real point of view with a real conviction behind it. You might disagree with it. And that's the point. The founders who do this well aren't trying to get everybody to nod along. They're trying to find the people who immediately think, finally, someone said it. Layer 3 is process. Process content shows your audience how you do the thing, the specific steps, the frameworks, the systems, the methodology behind your results. Give it a name, not my onboarding process. The content founder stack, something specific, something yours. The name is what makes it an ownable and memorable brand. That's the process content. This is the layer most founders skip because it feels counterintuitive. Like if you show people exactly how you do what you do, they won't need to hire you to do it. They'll just take the framework and do it themselves. It surprisingly doesn't work that way. What actually happens when you share your process is the opposite. People see the depth behind what you do and they realize they don't want to do it themselves. They want to hire the person who built the system because understanding how something works and being able to execute it at a high level are two completely different things. And here's the part that actually matters about process content. Most people can't keep up, or they'll try it once and get frustrated and stop. What happens next is they go back to the original person who taught them and pay for their help. By the time someone tries to execute your exact method themselves, they'll either realize they can't do it alone, or they'll get far enough to see how much more there is. Either way, you end up with more business from sharing your process than you would by having kept it to yourself. Process content builds trust faster than any other content type because it demonstrates competence in a way that perspective never can. Anyone can have an opinion. Heck, not everyone has a repeatable system. When you share your process, you're showing people how you actually think and work. And that's what convinces them. Here's what that process content looks like when it's done right. Not, I help clients improve their marketing strategy. That's a snooze fest. That's a service description. Process content sounds like every new client starts with what I call the authority audit. We look at their last 90 days of content and categorize every single piece into 3 buckets. That audit tells us in about 20 minutes exactly why their content isn't converting. Now the viewer understands how you think, how you work, and what it would actually feel like to work with you. That's what process content does that nothing else can. All right, I want to tell you about that founder I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. This was a genuinely impressive founder. Established business, real expertise, real client results in their field. They came to us because they had essentially no online presence and they knew it was time to build one. They had proof. That part wasn't the problem. They had client stories, real outcomes, real numbers, the kind of material that most founders would kill to have on camera. But every episode they recorded was written entirely by AI. They would take their client stories, feed them into a chat tool along with a topic, and read whatever came back directly onto the camera. And here's what happened to those stories in that process. The specific details got smoothed out. The moment that made that story real, the exact thing the client said, the turning point, the number that actually changed got replaced with a generalized version of business success story, something that could have been about really anyone, something something that sounded like every other business podcast episode you've ever have listened to. The perspective layer disappeared too. This founder had strong opinions about their field, real convictions that came from years of doing the work. But AI averages everything. It finds the middle of what everyone thinks and then gives you that. So their actual point never made it on camera. And the process layer got replaced with conventional wisdom, not their specific methodology, just a repackaged version of what was already out there. So here's what that audience got. Real client results, real expertise, real stories, all fed into a tool that turned them into content that sounded just like everyone else's. The proof was there. It just didn't sound like a person. The content didn't perform, and this founder blamed production and they left. I checked recently. They haven't published anything since, and that is the part that actually bothers me, because the raw material was there. The expertise was real. The client results were real too. They just never let any of it come through their own voice. You can have everything you need to build something real and still produce content that has nothing of you in it. So here's the important thing to remember. None of these layers work alone. I've seen founders with incredible proof content who nobody connects with because there's no personality behind the results. I've seen founders with strong perspectives who nobody hires because there's no evidence that they can actually execute. And I've seen founders who share detailed processes that nobody buys from because they have no proof that that process works. You need all three, not because it's a formula, because that is how trust actually gets built. Your proof tells them that you've done it. Your perspective tells them that you think about it. And your process tells them exactly how you would do it for them or with them. That combination is what builds the kind of trust that converts. Not actual engagement, not just followers, actual inbound, actual referrals, actual clients who reach out already convinced. Think of the founders who you follow online, who you would hire without hesitation. The ones where if they offered something tomorrow, you would already be leaning towards a yes. I bet they're posting all three layers whether they realize it or not. Evidence of results, a clear point of view, a window into how they work that makes you feel like you already understand them. That is what it looks like when it's working. And we've seen it. The clients who we've worked with who've built the strongest presence, the ones hitting tens of thousands of views consistently, the ones generating inbound opportunities from their content, they're doing all three. They show up with proof. They have opinions they'll actually stand behind, and they're willing to show their work. That combination is what separates the founders who build something real from the ones who post for a year and wonder why nothing moved. Here's something worth doing this week. Go look at your last 10 pieces of content, your last 10 posts, videos, episodes, whatever you've been publishing, and categorize each one. How many of those are proof? How many are perspective? How many are process? Most founders who do this find the same thing. 8 or 9 out of 10 are perspective. Maybe 1 is proof. Process is almost always 0. That tells you where the gap is. If you have no proof context, your next piece should be a client story, a specific result, a before and after that's real and grounded in something that actually happened, not a vague claim, a real story. If you have no process content, your next piece should be a named framework, a specific system that you give your own name to and make it yours. Show people not just what you actually believe in, but how you execute. And if your perspective has been softened and hedged and made safe for everyone to agree with, it's time for you to say the thing you actually believe, the uncomfortable version, the one that might push some people away, but puts the right people even harder into your corner. And this isn't about balance. Some founders will naturally produce more of one layer than another. And that's fine. The goal is to make sure all three are present and visible enough that a cold audience member can answer 3 questions after 10 minutes of your content. Have they done this? Do I trust what they think? And do I understand how they work? All 3 of those are questions that need a yes. If one of them doesn't, you know what's missing. Here's the hard truth. Most founders are working harder on their content than they should have to. Posting consistently, showing up, putting in all that time, and getting less than they deserve from it. Not because the content is bad, because it's missing 2/3 of what actually builds trust. The founder I told you about today had everything they needed to build a genuinely powerful presence, real expertise, real results, real credibility, and they produced content that had none of it because they handed their thinking to a tool that had no access to any of it. Nobody can put your proof, your perspective, and your process on camera. That part is you, my friend. That is what makes someone decide you're the one, and there's no shortcut around actually putting that on camera. Proof, perspective, process. That's the stack. That is what actual authority online looks like. I'm Michael Reynolds. We do this every Monday. If this gave you something concrete to work with, subscribe, because this is what we do here every week. And if you're a founder who's ready to build a presence that actually matches your reputation, the link is below. See you Thursday.